Imagine this. You wake up before sunrise. The ground beneath you is cold, hard, and damp. Around you, thousands of men are already moving, sharpening swords, strapping on armor, preparing for another brutal day. You have already marched 15 miles yesterday. Today, you will march 20 more. And then, if the gods are not on your side, you will fight. You will bleed. You might die. This was the daily reality of a Roman soldier. No comfortable beds, no restaurants, no refrigerators, no food delivery, just war, discipline, and survival. And yet, these men, fueled by the simplest of foods, built the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen. They conquered Britain in the cold north, Egypt in the scorching south, Persia in the distant east. Their boots walked across 3 continents. Their swords changed the course of human history. So what exactly did they eat? How did they survive on long campaigns, far from home, with no modern food preservation technology? What kept them strong enough to fight, march, and conquer day after day, year after year? The answer is both surprising and fascinating. Welcome to this channel where every week we uncover the forgotten survival secrets of history's greatest civilizations. Today, we go deep into the world of the Roman soldier, his food, his drink, his hunger, and his remarkable will to survive. Part 1: The Foundation of Roman Power. Grain. Let us start with the most important fact about Roman soldiers and food. The most powerful army in the ancient world was not built on meat. It was not built on wine or exotic spices. It was built on something far more humble: grain. Simple, ordinary grain. Every Roman soldier received a daily ration called frumentum, roughly 1 kilogram of grain, usually wheat or barley. This was the foundation of everything. Soldiers would carry small stone hand mills called quernstones with them on campaign. Every evening, after hours of marching or fighting, they would sit around the fire and grind their own grain. From this ground flour, they made 2 basic foods: a thick, heavy porridge called pulse, and a flat, hard bread that could survive for days without spoiling. Pulse was not glamorous food. Ancient writers described it as thick and bland. But it was calorie-dense, easy to make, and gave soldiers the energy they needed to survive brutal physical demands. On days when there was no time to bake bread, pulse was the meal. It kept the Roman war machine moving. The enemies of Rome actually mocked Roman soldiers for eating grain instead of meat. Germanic tribes, Celtic warriors, and Persian soldiers all considered grain food to be weak food for farmers, not fighters. They called Roman soldiers grain eaters as an insult. But history gave the final answer. The grain eaters built an empire that lasted for centuries. The meat eaters did not. Part 2: The Survival Kit. What every soldier carried, but grain alone was not enough. Roman soldiers were trained to carry a precise survival kit on every campaign, a collection of foods and supplies that could keep a man alive for weeks in hostile territory. First and most important was posca, a drink made by mixing water with sour wine vinegar. To modern ears, this sounds disgusting. But posca was a military masterstroke. In the ancient world, clean drinking water was one of the greatest dangers a traveling army faced. Rivers could be contaminated. Wells could be poisoned by enemies. Waterborne diseases killed more soldiers than enemy swords ever did. But vinegar, even in small amounts, is naturally antibacterial. Mixed with water, it made unsafe water dramatically safer to drink. It also provided some energy and helped prevent scurvy on long campaigns. Roman soldiers drank posca daily, and it kept them alive. Next came olive oil, perhaps the most versatile item in the Roman survival kit. Olive oil was used for cooking grain and bread. It was rubbed on skin to protect against extreme cold and heat. It was used to clean and preserve metal armor and weapons. And in desperate moments, it provided pure calories when no other food was available. A small flask of olive oil was worth its weight in gold on campaign. Then there was salt, and this brings us to one of the most fascinating facts in all of Roman history. Salt was so valuable, so essential to Roman soldiers that it became a form of payment. Roman soldiers were sometimes given a salt allowance as part of their compensation. This payment was called salarium in Latin, and that word is the direct origin of our modern English word salary. Every time you receive your paycheck, you are unknowingly connected to the salt rations of Roman soldiers 2,000 years ago. Soldiers also carried dried meat, hard cheese, lentils, chickpeas, and dried figs. These were foods chosen with military precision, high in calories, resistant to spoiling, and light enough to carry during long marches. A Roman soldier on the move typically carried supplies for 3 days at all times, enough to survive if supply lines were cut. Part 3, the supply network. Rome's secret weapon. Individual soldiers carrying food was only one part of the Roman survival system. The Roman army also built and maintained one of the most sophisticated military supply networks in the ancient world, a system called the Annona Militaris. Before any major campaign, Roman commanders would send scouts and logistics officers ahead of the army to survey the land, identify food sources, and organize supply routes. Grain was purchased or seized from local populations and stored in military granaries called horea, which were built at key points along the route of march. Supply wagons, loaded with food and equipment, followed the army across hundreds of miles. The famous Roman road network, stretching over 250,000 miles across the empire, was not built just for soldiers to march on. It was built to keep supply lines open. Food, weapons, and reinforcements could travel quickly along these roads, ensuring that even armies deep in enemy territory could be resupplied. Roman commanders understood a truth that many ancient generals forgot. An army that runs out of food does not just get hungry, it collapses. Soldiers desert. Discipline breaks down. Battles are lost not on the battlefield, but in the supply chain. This is why Roman military planners treated food logistics as seriously as they treated weapons and tactics. Part 4, when food ran out. Survival at the edge, but even the best supply system in the ancient world sometimes failed. Storms destroyed supply ships. Enemy forces cut supply routes. Sieges dragged on for months longer than expected. And when food ran out, Roman soldiers showed what true survival instinct looked like. Julius Caesar himself documented moments during his Gallic campaigns when food supplies failed. In one account, his soldiers survived for days on nothing but roots, wild grass, and whatever animals they could catch in the forests of Gaul. Yet even in these desperate conditions, Caesar reports that his men did not break. They continued to fight, to march, and to build. The psychological and physical conditioning of Roman soldiers allowed them to endure hardships that would have destroyed lesser armies. During prolonged sieges, the situation on both sides could become truly horrifying. When the Roman general Titus besieged Jerusalem in 70 AD, the city was surrounded for months. Historical accounts from that era describe scenes of desperate starvation inside the city walls, people eating leather sandals, belts, and worse. Outside the walls, Roman soldiers were better supplied, but they too faced shortages as the siege stretched on far longer than planned. Roman soldiers were also trained to forage to find food from the land around them. This was a military skill taken seriously. Soldiers learned which plants were edible, how to hunt game quickly without losing too much time, and how to identify safe water sources. Foraging parties would go out from the camp each day during prolonged campaigns, gathering whatever the landscape could offer. Part 5, the camp kitchen. Brotherhood around the fire every evening. When the Roman army stopped to make camp, something remarkable happened. After hours of marching through mud, rain, heat, or snow, after building the camp fortifications that Roman soldiers constructed every single night without exception, these exhausted warriors would gather around their cooking fires and share a meal. The Roman army was organized into units of 8 soldiers called a contubernum, meaning tent group. These 8 men shared one tent, one set of cooking equipment, and one fire. They ground their grain together, cooked their porridge together, and ate together every night. This daily ritual of shared food created bonds of loyalty and brotherhood that were central to Roman military strength. On special occasions after a major victory, During religious festivals or when supply lines were particularly good, soldiers might receive additional rations. Wine, meat, fish sauce called garum, and even sweets made from honey and dates would appear in the camp. These moments of abundance were celebrated deeply because soldiers understood how rare they were. The Roman camp kitchen was not just about food, it was about identity. A man who cooked and ate beside you for years, who shared your hunger and your rare moments of plenty, was not just a comrade, he was closer than a brother. And it was this bond, forged nightly around simple cooking fires, that made the Roman legions fight with such terrifying coordination and courage. So, what is the lesson of the Roman soldier's diet? What can we take from this story of grain, vinegar, salt, and shared meals around a fire? Perhaps it is this: true strength does not require luxury. The most powerful army the ancient world had ever seen was fueled not by feasts and abundance, but by discipline, simplicity, and brotherhood. Roman soldiers did not need the finest food. They needed enough to march, enough to fight, enough to survive one more day. And with that enough, they changed the world. The foods they ate, the grain porridge, the vinegar drink, the olive oil, the salt, these were not weaknesses. They were weapons. Quiet, humble weapons that sustained human bodies and human spirits through years of war and hardship far from home. History is full of armies that had better weapons, more soldiers, and more resources than Rome. But few of them could match the Roman soldier's ability to keep going, to march one more mile, fight one more battle, survive one more winter. And much of that endurance came from something as simple as a daily handful of grain, ground by hand, cooked over a small fire, shared with 7 brothers in the darkness before the next day of war. If you found this journey through history fascinating, please subscribe to this channel. Every week, we travel to a different civilization, a different crisis, a different moment, when human beings faced impossible odds and survived. Next week, we explore how Muslim warriors during the Crusades sustained themselves through years of brutal warfare, what they ate, how their food reflected their faith, and how they endured one of the most violent centuries in human history. Like this video if it opened your eyes to history in a new way. Leave a comment below, which ancient civilization survival story do you want to see next? And remember, the past is never really gone. It is alive in every meal we eat, every word we speak, and every lesson we choose to remember. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you in history.